Welcome, everyone, to Positive Life. My name is Jeff Taylor, and you are here with the HIV and Aging Research Project. And we produce these monthly Positive Life programs we have for the last, 15 years, 16 years now. And we're delighted to be able to join you back in person again. The last 2 years with COVID, we've had to be on Zoom, and we've gotten some new audience that way. And many of them are joining us here tonight, and we're delighted to have them. We're also delighted to be here in person. So something new tonight, besides kind of simulcasting, is that courtesy of Nicholas Snow with Promo Homo TV, we are going to be live streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and what was it? Twitter. Thank you. This is all new to us. So if there are any technical glitches, please bear with us. This is the first time we're doing this, but we're delighted to be able to make this available to everyone everywhere. And of course, it will be recorded afterwards. And our website is harp-ps.org. And I don't know if it shows up there, but it does. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for this evening, a man who needs little introduction to most people in the HIV world. He's a long-term activist, been around forever. We've been fortunate to have him come to Palm Springs many times. So we're happy to welcome back Nelson Vergel. Well, Nelson, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. An applause to Jeff Taylor, the hardest working, one of the hardest, I don't want to get anybody upset, activists left in the country, HIV activists. HIV activism is an endurance game. It is an endurance game. A lot of us have been doing it for over 20 years or so. And Jeff is one of the ones left still doing it. I do it once in a while, but not full time, Jeff. You're very lucky, I have to say, in Palm Springs to have Jeff because he keeps you connected to the research world. He's part of a CURE collaboratorium, so what do they call it now? The Martin lady, which I also part. But you definitely keep everybody updated on what's going on, which is rare in most cities now right now. Well, I'm happy to be back in Palm Springs. I shouldn't say post-COVID because we never know, right? But it's been a very hard 2.5 or almost 3 years for most of us doing Zooms and being isolated and quarantining. And it's been hard. It's been hard emotionally for all of us. It's been hard this is the first time I do a face-to-face presentation in 3 years. And not only we're doing that, but we're doing it in multimedia style, which is new to definitely to Jeff and his group. So I appreciate that. I really do. I love Palm Springs, and I love coming here, especially when the weather is great. It's been warm and great. So we're gonna go through the next slide, which I need to go into the slideshow view for this. But anyways, I just wanted to make sure before I proceed that this is a lecture for educational purposes, in no way a substitute for the advice of a qualified healthcare provider. I'm not a clinician, I'm not a doctor, I'm just an activist, educator, a lot like Jeff is, and I'm here just to present my views. There's nothing clinical about this, nothing medical about what I'm going to speak about. These are basically the headlines in HIV that we've gone through while we've been quarantined in the 2.5 years that we've gone through, and my views on them. So I do not mean it's all my opinions. Jeff is not really involved with my opinions, so I do have to say, now that I'm in video, I can say that and make sure that you guys understand that I'm not here to provide any medical advice, just my views on what's been going on while we're all cooped up at home and worrying about COVID. The first thing, because I just wanted to plug my group, is a listserv, which is an old thing. Most people right now are on social media. Well, this is not social media. This is a group online on the groups.io that you can subscribe by sending an email, like I said on the top, to PostHealth plus subscribe at groups.io. There are around 3,500 long-term survivors there. Most of us old-timers. We have been sharing research information since 94. So it's been a while. We have not only Jeff as a co-moderator, myself, We have Jules Levin, who goes to all the conferences and posts all the research. So if you're a geek in HIV, if you really want to stay ahead of the game, if you want to see data before even 6 months before it's published, I do think post-health is probably the only group where you're going to find the information that applies to a lot of us long-term survivors. So I'm very proud of it. It's been forever since, as I said, 94, 95, that we've been sharing information. So it is basically you're going to get 2 or 3 emails a day with the latest of the latest. So definitely suggest that everybody joins it. And I'm using a bunch of slides from different people. I stole slides. I did tell most of them that I was going to steal the slides. So Jeff Taylor, obviously, he's giving me some slides on the latest data on anal cancer and the study that actually many people here in Palm Springs participated. Michael Luera, who is a great, he's in Seattle, and he gave a great talk on HIV cure last week. I'm stealing some of his slides, but he knows I'm stealing them. Richard Jeffries from TAG, he's in New York. He's our cure guru. He's also a treatment activist and advocate. These are all non-clinicians, non-medical people that are all geeks into data. And so I'm using a lot of their slides. Clinical Care Options, which is a website that trains physicians on the latest research in HIV. I'm using some of their slides, and Corinne Dubé, who is a PhD that also works in the cure area and has been nice enough to let me use some of her slides too. So what are we going to speak about? This is by no means, I'm doing something very different today. I usually I speak too long, too much, usually concentrate on hormones since that's been my niche. I've been positive for, I don't know, I stopped counting like most of us, maybe 37 years. I'm from Venezuela. This is where you're hearing this Spanish accent from. And I've been in this country for as long, I got, I became positive, well, don't know, maybe 83. Came to the United States in 84. By 86, when the test came out, most of you, that's what I like about Palm Springs. Most people in this room can relate to what I'm talking about because most of you, I'm assuming, are long-term survivors. And that's rare to go to any city where there's such high concentration of long-term survivors. But as I said before, there's a lot that has been happening in the past few months. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the New York case of what we assume. What happened to the slides? Huh? No, they're still here. Everything is good. No, the computer is charged. Excuse me again. Yeah, sorry, we're in the dark, but I'm gonna keep speaking. It has happened before. Let's see how good of a speaker I am. So the New York case of a cure, and I'm putting in asterisks, a cured case of a woman, the first woman to be cured, and as I said, it's in parentheses, of HIV. Why is our case any different? I'm gonna, just 2 slides on a brief overview of cure research strategies, the latest and probably the most outstanding research findings that we have from the anal cancer treatment research. Long-acting medications that have been approved in the past 3 years, injectables mostly, and an update on treatments for people with multi-drug resistance. And one of them, I've been positive, as I said, for a long time. I joined a few studies and developed multi-drug resistance. My HIV is highly mutant. I built up resistance to protease inhibitors, integrase inhibitors, nucleosides, and non-nucleosides. So I'm always, I only became undetectable 6 years ago. I'm on an IV called Trogarzo and a few other drugs to, thank God, finally I'm undetectable, even though I speak around the country. I was one of the few last ones to become, to have HIV undetectable. But I'm gonna speak about what people like me with multi-drug resistance, what options they are, the new options are out there. And the forgotten few, there's at least 20% of us, long-term survivors, that have low CD4 cells under 300 CD4s. And we've been living like this for a while. I have 275. And what's going to happen to us? We have a higher probability of mortality and more comorbidity. And there are a few activists like myself involved in trying to convince the biotech companies, the small companies especially, to proceed with more research on drugs that can increase our immune cells, our CD4 cells. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that because that's dear to my heart for obvious reasons. And the latest data at CROI just happened in February, the main HIV conference worldwide. It was on Zoom due to COVID. But there's some really interesting data on exercise, resistance exercise, weight training when you go to the gym and do machines and weights, and what's happening with cognitive function, inflammation, and lab tests. The influence of exercise on lab tests. And the most, I think, is one of my most. I'm very much following the whole section on the whole field of psychiatry. We're about to enter a new tsunami. I'm married to a psychiatrist. He's about to retire, so he's not going to be able to be a part of this tsunami that is coming with the use of psychedelic therapies, FDA approved. So it's something that I'm really interested in. I've actually already have experimented with a few of these with amazing results. And I think it's about time that we talk about it, especially in California. There's a problem up there with the AV, it's not mine. So let's see how it goes. And last but not least, hormone treatments, since everybody usually asks questions about hormones, testosterone or whatever, the latest from women in the United States. This is definitely, I knew something was going to happen when we do so many technologies at the same time. So hey, it's not happening. So it's not my first time at the rodeo, so we'll do it. So this case that you just heard of, what, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, of the person was, as I said, in quotes, cured of HIV, the first woman. And the first time I saw the news, not only I saw there was the first woman, but also a multi-race or mixed race woman. So I said, well, why are they having to say that, right, on the headlines? What is so special about it? Well, first time there was a woman, and first time it was a woman of mixed race, some African American and white. We don't know all the other races. Michael Luera did a great presentation last week about that. But she got a cord blood stem cell transplant 3 years ago. It wasn't just recently, 3 years ago. And she has been off meds for the last 14 months with no detectable viral load. She's actually antigen negative, so her HIV tests show up negative. And you guys in Palm Springs, more than anybody else in the country, know about Timothy Brown, who unfortunately we lost. Was it last year, Tim? I forget, or a year and a half ago, we had a memorial service here in Palm Springs, the first person that was cured of HIV after chemo and radiation and a stem cell transplant, a bone marrow transplant. But she's supposedly number 3. The first one was Tim Brown, a white man, American living in Berlin. The second one in London, a Venezuelan man like me, I'm Venezuelan, living in London. We were cured like 3 years ago. Tim Brown survived. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he survived 13 and a half years or so, Tim, without HIV coming back. And now we have this report of the first women that got also seems, and I say the word seems because there's no detectable viral load, and they have done some sampling on organ tissue that has no viral load or HIV present. So far, it's only been 14 months. So saying cure is really a little too soon, even though the media jumped on it all over the place about the word cure. It wasn't until a few days that, oh, good. It's back. Can you go to full screen? Yeah, it's okay. I'll do fine with this. We'll do fine, even if it's not full screen. So as I said, it's already a different case. We had, as I said, media jumping on this, and obviously it's an exciting news, but I think the word cure is being used too soon, since it's only been 14 months since she's been off HIV meds. Hey, probably, hopefully it'll be, fingers crossed. So let's talk about why this may be different from what we have seen in the past. And thank you, Michael, who is actually on Zoom, for letting me use his slides. So she's being undetectable or no HIV detectable, even one. So for research purposes, we run viral load down to 1 copy per milliliter. Most of us run, our doctors run a viral load 20 copies or less, right? We used to have 500 copies or less, then 200 copies or less. The test has been getting more and more, precise, efficient. For research, they can do actually 1 copy of virus per mil. So she has had no indication that the virus is there. She received a transplant to treat leukemia 3 years ago after she failed chemo for leukemia. Usually in these studies with for cure, you have to have failed the first round of chemo or radiation, whatever it is for your cancer, to be considered for something that is risky. It's either a stem cell transplant, in this case, a cord blood cell. She stopped HIV medications 14 months ago. She's doing well. Her cancer and HIV are in remission. The word remission, that's really what we're trying in the activist world to make media aware that we shouldn't use the word cure so quickly. We should use the word remission. Timothy Brown, 13 and a half years, that's probably pretty much a cure, right? The virus never bounced back after that long. But it is too soon for her to say, for anybody to say she's cured. But experts are hopeful. So let's see what else changed. Why is her case so different? She's middle-aged, postmenopausal, as I said, the first woman. She was diagnosed with HIV in 2013, leukemia diagnosis in 2017. And some of us are that unlucky. We have HIV. I was diagnosed with lymphoma 5 years ago and had to go through chemo, but I responded, luckily. So I didn't have to be included in one of these studies. She was part of this observational study cohort called IMPACT P1107 for mostly people that are receiving cord blood transplants, not what Tim and the London patient actually got. It's a little different. It's a lot easier to get one of these samples than it was for the 2 previous men that were cured. So basically umbilical cord blood, that was what was used. And they had to find somebody, a donor that actually have a double CCR5 delta mutation, what we call a homozygous donor. Heterozygous is somebody has 1 mutation out of the 2. And the homozygous population is very small, very small. It's actually less than 1% in Northern Europeans. Once you go down from the Northern European area down to the South Mediterranean, Africa, Latin America, it's almost non-existent. There are many theories why these people have the double mutation. Some theories that have never been proven say there was an umbilical, bubonic plague survivors, but that has never been really proven. It's very rare indeed in men and women of color. And she obviously was mixed race, so they have to find a close genetic match with the double mutation. So that in itself is a challenge. So we don't really know out of the umbilical cord blood donors, how many of them have a double mutation for the CCR5 receptor on the CD4 cells, but they did find somebody that could, a donor that could match with their, the fact that she was mixed race and a woman, because you also have to match by gender and by race, which is not an easy thing to do, especially for mixed race. So we haven't had a case where umbilical cord blood was used because is being basically bone marrow. Tim and the London patient had bone marrow directly from bone marrow as donors from the source. The volume of cells still for cord blood is very small. So I'm going to speak a little bit of what they did to overcome this. Cells are slower to engraft and become established in the body. So what they do is like combine what they call a haplocord transplant. They combine the CCR5 delta 32 mutation, the homozygous, a double, with some adult donor stem cells without the CCR5 mutation. They do that basically to support the immune system and make the CCR5 delta 32s to actually establish better in the body. So it's a little bit of mix of the double mutant, the protected CCR5, the protected cells, combined with a little bit of the adult donor stem cells that don't have this mutation, just to make them engraft better in the body. That's something I just learned. Michael actually presented this last week and said, wow, so they're actually combining some stem cells that are not a mutant or resistant to HIV to this delta 32, CCR5 delta 32 cord blood cells. And all of them before her have had intensive chemotherapy and whole body radiation. Timothy did. Timothy Brown, as you well know, because he used to speak, he was living here and spoke here several times. He was close to death more than once through the whole process. So it's not an easy thing to go through. I remember Tim. I actually miss him. I came here for his memorial. And he said he would not wish this on his best friends, even though he was cured, because it was such a difficult, hard thing that almost killed him. So people always ask me, why have we not used this in other people to cure more people? So the interesting thing about this woman is that she did not develop this graft versus host disease, which is the way, the body actually reacting against your new donor transplant. And that can kill you. It almost killed him once or twice, I forget, but I think he told me more than once. So that she didn't have that. She didn't have that reaction. So that's a plus, because usually that's the biggest risk. Within 100 days, the donated immune system engrafted, meaning the body actually accepted it and kept reproducing. So it takes a while, as you can tell. And the test that they did on her showed that her new immune cells were resistant to HIV, which is great. But interestingly, unlike Timothy, he had, basically he had mutations, double mutations to a CCR5, receptor on the CD4. There's another receptor, the CXCR4. These are more rare. It's actually connected to long-term HIV, some of the salvage patients, some of the patients with more immune dysfunction, but she also had resistance, her immune cells resistant to the CXCR4. Timothy did not have. Timothy actually chose to be on PrEP to prevent getting that type of strain. But she has both the CCR5 and the CXCR4. No, I don't think Croy explained why she was able to get both mutations. So that's actually very surprising. She was on HIV treatments for 3 years after the transplant. So the transplant has been a while. And this is an observational cohort that is following a few people. She's not the only one. She's the first one, obviously, that has been presented to the world, but we are expecting other people from that cohort that followed the same procedure as she did, to basically in the next few months come out to the media and we spread this great news. So she has no replication competent HIV, and she zero reverted, meaning she became HIV negative a year after transplant. They do basically the antibody antigen test that we got the first time that we were diagnosed, right? So she's actually, that test is coming out negative. So that's all great news. We really hope that she remains in remission and hopefully cure. So as we know, Timothy, our friend Timothy, you guys, I'm sure everybody in this room met him. We miss him dearly. He passed in 2020. And the second one was Adam Castillejo, Venezuelan like me. They call him the London patient. I guess we tend to name these patients after the place they live. The new patient is called a New York patient. So we have to call them something before they come out. She has not come out. Her identity, we don't know. And some of them remain, obviously, they really guard their privacy. And that's their choice, obviously. But, and that's obviously, Tim was number one. Number two was Adam a few years later. And everybody's saying that she's number three, but Michael actually showed this slide. And there's supposedly a Dusseldorf patient from Germany that will be eventually known in the media that he's been cured. So whether or not she's number three or number four, who really cares? But that's something that was very interesting that I didn't know last week, that there's a third patient that they're waiting for more data to be disclosed. So she's actually, whether or not she's number three or four at this point, does it really matter? But we're happy there's more than one. Timothy, in his speeches, used to say that his dream was for all of us, for everybody to be cured and for him not to be the only one. So the difference between Timothy and Adam, they basically both, I don't know why this is changing. Michael, you're on Zoom and it's your fault. The donors are both CCR5 homozygous resistant. I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can put a stop. One had leukemia, another lymphoma, two stem cell transplants, so Tim got. This is annoying. And Adam only had one stem cell transplant. Tim also got radiation and chemo, and got a really full high intensity depletion of his T cells. You actually have to erase the immune system for the new immune system to take over. He had supposedly a mild graft versus host disease, but not in his words. He reminded me that it was not mild. And Adam basically had very mild reaction too, but his chemo and he had no radiation. So there are differences. So all of them have one thing in common. They're all got a double CCR5 delta 32 mutation, and they're all cured. So that has, so far, has been the common denominator. There's supposedly two HIV positive men. We got some data in the past that we were hoping that they were cured, but they got transplanted for cancer with normal stem cells with no mutations. And they did not remain undetectable or in remission once they stopped antiretrovirals. So we know that if you're gonna get a transplant, it has to be double mutated. So they did not receive intensive conditioning and radiotherapy. So the researchers were hoping that, hey, if we make it a little easier by removing some of these requirements, maybe we can actually cure these people. But no, you have to go at least through the double CCR5 mutation as a donor to actually get cured. But Castillejo, the London patient, did not receive intensive conditioning. Conditioning is chemo and radiotherapies, obviously radiation. So Castillejo did not need to go through all that nightmare, which is not easy to go through. So every single case is an improvement on the previous one. So we're getting closer. I know we're far from a cure, especially for people like us that don't have salvage or chemo-resistant cancer, right? They're doing it on these patients because they are gonna die any other way. So the risk to benefit ratio is different, right? So we are not even close to curing all of us in this room. And if we even try, it's not only super expensive, but super risky, but there is progress. And I know people get really frustrated after so many years. I mean, what, 37 years? I forget, I lost count like most of us. the 40 years that we haven't found the cure. I mean, COVID had a vaccine. We haven't had, so there are many frustrations. What people don't really understand is that thousands of people working on cure research, and HIV is a lot more tricky than COVID, a lot more tricky than a lot of the other viruses that we're being able to control. So, but there is progress, and hopefully, maybe my lifetime, I'm not 100% sure, I'm 63, a lot of us here in our 60s and 70s, maybe we'll see, maybe we won't see. Something that we used to think is that part of being cured, not only you had to have this double CCR5 Delta 32 mutation from a donor, but you also had to have this reaction of the body, this graft versus host disease to be cured. So you have to have that plus that. Not only have to go through finding a donor, which is not easy to find a donor that matches with you, your genetic composition. Not only you have to find somebody that has double mutation, but also that is compatible with your genetic makeup. That's like a needle in a haystack, but we're having more and more of those people donate bone marrow. But anyways, so now with her and with Castillejo from London, we at least know that the graft versus host disease, which is what kills people. And by the way, in Germany, after Timothy was cured, they tried it on 12 people. I counted 12, and they all died because of the graft versus host disease. So it's not part of the equation anymore, because at least we know 2 people did not have to go through that hell to get cured. So that's something that we've learned. She did not experience graft versus host disease, and the chemotherapy and radiation was not needed. So even though people think, hey, this is taking forever, it is taking a long time. I have to say, I'm frustrated, but I'm part of the cure groups that we meet with the researchers. I have to say, everybody's busy. It's not like for a lack of not wanting, but it is a tricky virus. So they're not these stem cells or even cord blood cells. Transplants are not a cure, even though the media keeps saying that. And obviously they want us to click and to sell more advertising. So they're medical intensive, too costly, not scalable to treat millions. I mean, there's 38 million now people with HIV around the world. They're risky. So this case is super important because it provides further proof that the latent reservoir and HIV that's the tricky part of HIV. This little bug hides everywhere. It hides inside our DNA, our code, but he can believe it can be clear enough to produce durable remission, at least 13 and a half years with Timothy. And this case offers clues that could lead to a more widely applicable cure. We are waiting, obviously, for the rest of the patients in that cohort. And also there's another cohort that has been started in Seattle. So the cord blood program is actually exciting because it's a lot easier to get cord blood transplants than bone marrow. So that's very encouraging. I think this is the best news we've had in a while. And hopefully, I think a lot of these patients, a few of them, will pop up in the next 12 months in the media. And hopefully we'll get more and more research money for cure. Just in 1 or 2 slides, there are strategies that are being used to treat HIV to cure it. Immunotherapy, basically trying to improve your immune function. Cell and gene therapy. I don't know why this is moving on, but hey. Early treatment, the earliest we start, the less reservoirs that we have. Antibodies, antibody treatment like we did with COVID. They're actually trying combinations of those antibodies to have an immune response against HIV. And latency reversing agents. Some of them are chemo agents to flush HIV from the reservoirs and then kill it and block it and treat it and shock it. So there's a combination, and hopefully, as we see more and more studies, we'll get there. So now we're gonna switch to a completely different topic. I should not be giving this lecture, it should be Jeff, but he wanted me to bring it up again. The anchor study is, it was how long have you been part of this group, the committee? 10 years? I don't know.
They started 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
The study was going on for 7 years.
7 years. So to get funding to see, and I have to say, I'm one of them. I'm one of those patients that had a lot more work up my butt than I wanted to. I had to say that as a joke, but it's no joke. Not a fun thing to go through. But I've been treated for for anal dysplasia, high grade, for the past 10 years. I go to get my butt checked once a year just to make sure it isn't progressing to anal cancer. But believe it or not, it has not been proven until now that actually monitoring people that have been detected to have anal dysplasia or precancerous cells in your anus actually would be better than just watching them and not doing anything. When this study first came out for review, I was against it. So how dare you put people on observation versus people with treatment, meaning, catheterization. How dare you do that? That should be unethical, but we had to do it. And Jeff he convinced me, hey, I want you to support this because insurance companies and everybody else, basically standard of care, are not going to approve only the privileged few. I'm a privileged man with insurance and have monitoring and treatment of anal dysplasia. This is not something that is standard of care in HIV. Most people with HIV don't get their butts checked. And not only women, I'm talking about men and women. I'm talking about tops and bottoms. I'm talking about gay and straight. And I'm not only talking about, anal receptive intercourse, but you could be a top and still get, it is an HPV related, it's a norovirus related issue. It is very stressful. It's very emotional. It's something that most people don't want to talk about. And I have to say, it's been stressing me out for years, okay? Just going once a year to make sure nothing has progressed. Every time they see something that may be suspect, they basically use this thing to burn it out and basically kill that mucosa that may be shining differently than the healthy mucosa they spray it, believe it or not, vinegar, just like they do in women with cervical cancer and pap smears like that. So it is not fun, but I at least have to say I have had the privilege to keep an eye on it. I had two friends that have died of anal cancer, even they caught it a little late, going through chemo and all that. So at least now we have this for the first time and large study done, and a lot of patients where maybe some of you in this room were part of the study in Palm Springs that actually proved that actually treating them proactively, treating those lesions actually is better off for the patients. So we'll see what happens with insurance companies and standard of care on the country. And now that we have really strong, huge cohort data, Dr. Palensky and Jeff has been the only and main activist pushing for approval. 4,400 patients were enrolled in the United States, and they all have to have anal dysplasia, like already diagnosed with something going on in their anus that may be suspect. So all of them, half of them were treated, the other half were not treated, but were observed. And if something came up that was really suspect, they would actually give them treatment. So it was ethical. And what we don't know, something that most of us long-term survivors don't know, is that incidence of anal cancer in HIV positive people is really high. It's actually as high or greater of incidence than breast cancer and prostate cancer in the general population. That's very scary. We have been, and I get emotional, we have been surviving this. Most of us in this room probably for over 25 years. I would say probably more than 30. And obviously, thank God we're here, right? After COVID and all that, we're standing here like face to face, which is a miracle already. And a lot of us have things obviously to worry about. We've been told, heart disease may be higher in us because of the long-term inflammation or the lowest CD4 counts, which are called CD4 nators, or whatever it is. Our cholesterol has gone higher because of some of the treatments, protease inhibitors mostly is what integrates, or our visceral fat is increased because of this and that. So we're always being hit. And I'm actually tired of it. I tell Jules Levin, who is another amazing activist, I'm tired of hearing bad news about us, about how we can get hit harder as we live longer with this disease. I want to hear some good news. Maybe call me whatever, but to say that the anchor study at least was some part of the good news, the New York patient, good news. So today I'm actually concentrating on good news because I'm tired of the bad news. And here we are after COVID, good news, we're here. The mask mandate in California has been lifted on Monday. I mean, we have vaccines. Obviously, it's not over. It's never going to be over. HIV also, like we're used to viruses. My friends with HIV were freaking out. I was freaking out too on COVID, but we have been living with fear of a virus for over 30 years. Not like we are immune to fear. We are as afraid of it, but we have at least a certainty, maybe faith. I don't even want to use that word because I have no faith per se. But there is this need for us to hear good news. We're not only surviving, which is pretty amazing, the fact that most of our friends have died and we're here, and some good news once in a while wouldn't be bad. So I have to say, the anchor study, hey, let's now get everybody with HIV, especially anybody, long-term or non-long-term survivors, have some monitoring or vaginal. I'm not saying anal because HPV does not discriminate about anus or vagina, and actually get them treated if they need to. Not going to go through this diagram, but there was an intervention arm and a monitoring arm, and whoever was found to have cancer or was sent to treatment, obviously. But it was long enough to now say, hey, this was not a pilot study. This was actually a large study funded by the NIH, by federal taxpayer money. So, we use a lot of the techniques for anal cancer, and Jeff is the expert. I told him, Jeff, well, I'll do it for you just to tell the audience that we have this great news, but you're gonna have an anchor update.
We had one in December with Dr. Morris from the AP.
So I'm not gonna talk too much about it, but we use basically the same techniques used for inspecting the cervix in females. Anoscopy and anoscope, which is not fun. I mean, you lay there, they make you bend over and stick this thing to open up your anus. Not fun, but it's bearable. I didn't need a value or anything like that. And they do the endoscopic inspection of the anus. And if they see anything, they just basically zap it with this tool and monitor you. So anyways, let's switch topics from the anus, I guess, to treatment. I do get a little intense there because it's really been, yeah, I mean, we all have friends that died of heart attacks, and we've been told, hey, this is what highest incidence in HIV, but anal cancer has been that dark topic nobody wants to talk about, but everybody's afraid of, because we've been told for many years that this is something that we have a much higher incidence, not only because we have HIV, inflammation, and HPV. And a lot of us have a lot of the genotypes. HPV, there are many types of HPV, and there are maybe 4 that are cancerous out of 45? We keep counting. But most of us, if you had sex for a while, you probably have a lot of the cancerous types. Does that mean you're going to get cancer? No, not at all. But you do have to keep an eye. Never assume. I have to say, people say, well, some people just wait too long until something comes. They feel like they have hemorrhoids or something there. No, actually be proactive and you guys in Palm Springs, you can talk about that later. I don't live here. You guys are actually more advanced than most cities in the country to keep an eye on that. Let me switch because I'm PTSD obviously about the whole topic. So, other good news. We had the FDA approved in 2021, January, the first combo of long-acting injections for treatment of HIV, Cabenuva, which is really two different products. One is an integrase inhibitor, cabotegravir. Another one's rilpivirine. They're both long acting. You basically get a shot in your butt every month. I really thought this was going to change the game, especially not for many of us with long-term HIV taking. We're taking oral meds for different things, blood pressure, cholesterol, you name it, benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH. So we are used to taking meds every day. I mean, we come from the times where Crixivan was 3 times a day. Remember, when we had to get up in the middle of the night to take meds. So we are used, long-term survivors, to taking meds every day. But the younger, newly infected, probably will do better. They don't have to worry about daily meds with an injection in their butts. It is a high volume injection, oil-based. So a lot of side reactions and pain in the butt. More, don't want to be facetious about it, but there is pain in the butt. And it has not, I have to say, it has not had the uptake that I thought it would be, because for me, if I was young and just got tested, I would probably go for an injection so I don't have to take pills every day. But it's had some problems. Insurance reimbursement, doctors have to go for pre-authorization letters, and you have to show up for the injection. You cannot do it at home. So some people show up, some people don't show up. You have to start oral meds first. But these 2 drugs are actually also, they come in oral forms. You have to start that for a month, I forget, to make sure you don't have side effects before you switch to injection. So that complexity. So it has not been the game changer that most of us expected, including doctors, but it is there, and it is so far so good. The ones that are using it seem to be happy. The injection reactions tend to get better with time, so it is a good option. The better yet is December 20th, 2021, just basically a few months ago, the PrEP version of basically cabotegravir, which is part of that combo for treatment. This is for prevention, was also approved. Very exciting. I really believe this could actually be the game changer, because taking Truvada every day, we've seen some data that a lot of people are not keeping up with taking them daily because they get tired of it, or most of us, or not us, I should say, because of HIV, do not think they're having that much sex that frequently to be taking it, but it only works if you're taking it almost every day. You can probably skip 1 or 2 times a week. But this is an injection that you get at the doctor's office every 2 months, 1 injection that protects you against getting infected with HIV. So I hope, and I think it will probably make a big difference for the men and women that are having a hard time taking Truvada every day for prevention. I would. If I was HIV negative, why not? I mean, every 2 months, I go to the doctors and don't have to worry about taking it daily and then worrying about whether or not I was just exposed to HIV. It really makes sense. Well, let's see how it picks up in the United States. Obviously, we have a lot of privilege and a lot of luxury in the United States, having access to a lot of treatments that most countries would just dream about. And this is one of them. We usually get them approved in the States, although the long-acting treatment injections were approved in Canada first. And this is another topic dear to my heart. Multi-drug resistance, for obvious reasons. I've had it. They used to call us deep salvage. They have changed that for MDR. I'm a deep salvage patient, meaning I'm on my last combo. So I'm always, is the main thing that keeps me interested in reading everything I can about HIV research, because I'm hoping that I remain undetectable for as long as I can. I'm 63. Life has been pretty good in the past 6 years. I don't have to worry constantly about my viral load and my CD4s going down, even though they've gone down pretty much, but they're pretty much stable. So I'm on the lookout for what's next in case that, and I'm on an IV, on an venous treatment every 2 weeks. So I have to go to a clinic, to an infusion center and get my IV and take my other oral drugs every day. So I'm not complaining. Super expensive. It's like $7,000 a month. And thank God I have good insurance. So once again, privilege. Some of us are privileged. I'm very lucky to be privileged, but a lot of people don't have that privilege. And it's unfortunate that for MDR, privilege gets you to live. I have to say that. And it's horrible to say, but it is true. And who are those? Who are these people who are like, did we screw up? Like I used to go to conferences or even meetings where most doctors and researchers would say that people with multi-drug resistance are the ones that didn't take their meds. So they developed this problem. Some of them were, drug use or whatever it was. I would get really upset because, maybe that's one of the factors, but a lot of us were guinea pigs. I've been around forever. So I joined a few studies thinking, hey, I want to live, but I exposed myself to something called functional monotherapy, which is basically adding a new drug on top of what we call a failing regimen, a regimen that was not, suppressing your viral load. And we all develop resistance in every single study. We develop resistance to that drug. There's still companies, and I'm really going to say this out loud. Pharmaceutical companies are still doing this. They're still doing studies, all of them, with an arm that is an open label, they call it, arm for people with MDR that have no other options. And they're exposing us, even though I fought for years to have the FDA not allow that. And the FDA actually was really amazingly friendly and created a way to do studies without exposing us, the few of us that are still around, to monotherapy, functional monotherapy. They're still doing it. They went around that protocol. Don't get me, and I'm on video. I can say this because my time to actually say something and they're still doing it. They're still getting around exposing people to functional monotherapy. Those people, all of them, there's no point to even try. All of them are going to develop resistance, but they're really easy to get drugs approved. We are really easy participants to get drugs approved. We still are. So that hasn't gone away. And it's difficult. We have to have at least 2 or 3 active, what we call active agents. What does that mean? Active drugs in our genotype. When you get a resistance testing, you can either get genotype or phenotype or the archive DNA testing that your doctor says, your probabilities for this drug to work for your HIV are high or low, or we don't know. So most of us need to have at least 2 drugs that show up as active in that report. Sometimes it's not easy. Thank God the proportion, not thank God, because most of us have died. That's why our proportion is going down. And some of us have had the privilege, like I have, to access an IV. They're super expensive that my insurance pays for it. So the incidence of MDR is going down, but it's not going down just because the world's amazing. It's just the world that we have even died, or some of us have been lucky enough to be around. So as I said, I get very upset because obviously I've had my frustrations as an activist. It was my biggest frustration. My partner can tell you how many days I spent angry about this, 15. So anyways, so I'm always looking. This drug is islatravir from Merck. I've been salivating over this drug. It's an oral drug, the first oral long-acting agent, meaning you could take it, in this case was like once a week. They were also doing studies for people like me, daily, lower dose. We were happy. We were actually, all of us as activists, like, wow, the first non-injectable high oral, and actually works for people with multi-drug resistance and this and that. And Merck was very happy. And we usually have a good relationship with Merck. But just 2 months ago, 3, I don't know, I was depressed all week. They had a ad hoc meeting with all of us in the activist world to tell us, hey, we have bad news. After so many months of exciting news, viral load over is going down. they found out that CD4 cells were going down after they did a review. So, and this drug was not only used for treatment, but also for prevention. They also found out that in prevention, the white blood cells were going down. So really, I don't remember, I've been following HIV since the 80s. I don't remember a drug that viral load response was amazing, and all of a sudden the immunological response was not good. So obviously, big downer. They had to halt all studies. They had studies on treatment, studies for naive patients, the early diagnosis, the studies for the multi-drug resistance. They had studies for PrEP. So big letdown, and that's recently just happened. And they're looking why. They're looking into why is this drug causing CD4s to go down. So we're still hoping that they can find a lower dose daily that can work for people like us, because I wouldn't mind getting off the IV every 2 weeks. But we'll see. It's not good news, and I have to say it's the biggest letdown that I've had in activism for a while. All of us, because we were really cheerleaders for this drug. So yeah, and this is the next one I have my eyes on from Gilead, and I hope that it works, because now we have a little trauma with the oral drug. This is an injection. It's a capsid inhibitor, giving every 6 months. Imagine how long acting this drug is. And it's been submitted for treatment of extensive drug resistance. That's what I have, and some of us have. And also being studied for PrEP, for pre-exposure prophylaxis, showing really good protection. And but right now the studies had halted because they found some issues with the not with the product, but with the vials. Long story, but hopefully they'll resolve that. It's not the drug, it's the vials. They're leaching, they're glass vials, and they may be leaching some glass into the drug itself. But that's I'm crossing my fingers, because that is not drug related. And it is an HIV capsid inhibitor. Capsid is this membrane you see around the nucleus that it gets disintegrated while there's integration of the virus into the cell. And also when the new viral particles pop up out of a cell, you need to integrate the capsid. So it gets basically, it blocks both sides of the capsid process. Since I'm running out of time, immunological nerve response. Some of us not only are MDR, multi-drug resistant, but also immunological non-responders. What does that mean? Our viral loads went down, undetectable. Our immune system, our CD4s went up, because most studies, we go up, and then we start going down and stabilize. And INRs, so you can be an MDR plus an INR, which is where I am. And some of us, maybe 10% of us are. So we're living okay, healthy enough. Our T cells are only 300, undetectable for a while, but we are INRs. Wouldn't be nice, and there's some studies that show that people with INR may have more cardiovascular disease, comorbidities, even survival. So wouldn't it be nice to have products that can increase CD4 cells for everybody, not only for those that are doing well, but also for people like me. So we did present, and I don't want to, we did present a proposal to FDA. The FDA embraced it. It was great, but we haven't had any uptake, from biotech pharmacies, because they got scared. They got scared because of IL-2, interleukin 2. And you guys are long-term sources, I can tell, you know what IL-2 is a cytokine that showed really good results on CD4 increases. Many people in the studies had T cell increases, CD4s. But long-term studies found out that it did not improve survival back in the days when we could do those studies. So a lot of companies said, to boost T cells, try to actually get something approved to boost T cells, it's not feasible anymore, because we cannot do studies that measure survival, because we're all surviving so long. But we convinced the FDA that, hey, allow these companies to do studies of immune boosters for improvement of quality of life. Some of us have GI gut problems, some of us may have fatigue, whatever it is. And the FDA says, sure, why not? And but we haven't, and that's been a few years. We haven't had a single biotech that is willing to put the money on looking at other options. And there's IL-7, another interleukin. They're also great CD4 increases, but the company, a French company, decided to abandon the drug. And that's also, there were some issues about viral blips and stuff. And we haven't been able to, a Korean company got it, and we haven't been able to get them to be excited about this. And the most promising is this gene therapy studies that was done in San Francisco, where they pulled out people's CD4 cells in a lab, obviously. They injected them or modified them with this called zinc finger nuclease. I'm not going to bore you with details because we're running out of time. But it basically made this CD4 resistant to HIV, almost like the CCR5 delta 32s. Very exciting. It was a small study. We actually know 2 activists that were part of it, and their CD4 cells went up, only 1 infusion, because basically you grow these CD4s that are extracted from your body, manipulate them in the lab, and reinfuse them to you. 1 infusion, and at least 2 people that I know has CD4s going up by 300 and stay there for a year. And then obviously it wears off, but hey, we're like, how about 2 infusions? How about if we do every 6 months? But the company, once again, because they're all afraid, terrified about immune boosting and trying to prove a drug for FDA approval, even though we say, hey guys, you can do another type of study. Just ask these people, do you feel less tired? Do you have less diarrhea? Do you have less, whatever it is that we usually have problems with? So very frustrating. I think the world would really benefit from immune boosting therapies, right? Especially if you don't screw up with your viral load. So this is Sangamo. Sangamo, if you're watching this video or this screen, I don't know if they do, please reconsider, because I think it's a low-hanging fruit. I really think so. It is obviously not cheap, because you have to basically bring everybody into the lab, do a modification for the T cells, and reinfuse them. God knows how much that would cost, but it's definitely a potential. And there's some other studies looking at different options to increase CD4 cells. Well, we all hope we survive longer, right? But most of us just want a better quality of life, less fatigue, less GI distress, bloating, whatever it is. So we'll see. I'm still hopeful, but as you can tell, there are few activist areas that we still need to work on, and a few of us are left. I have to say, it's an endurance game. We're all getting older, and in the activist world, Jeff is one of the few left that is actually working hard. Quickly, I'm going to go quickly because Jeff is going to cut me off. I left disability, 4 or 5 years ago, I forget. I was on disability. That's why I did so much work with my nonprofit. And then decided, hey, my viral load is undetectable for the first time. It'll be nice to make some money beyond just the disability payments. And some of us obviously lived on this and have lived and are living with disability for a long time. So I created a lab testing company called Discounted Labs. I've learned a lot about blood testing, obviously, because that's my business now, about the effect of different things on blood tests that freak out doctors. And yet there's an explanation that has nothing to do with HIV and nothing to do with the HIV meds we're taking. It's actually exercise is one of those things that affect blood work, and doctors do not actually know. Muscle, like resistance exercise, the gym, machines. I do muscle machines. I don't do free weights. And all of us probably go to the gym here. I know it's a big thing here in Palm Springs. Workout, and our kidney function, our creatinine, may actually go up. The more muscle mass you have, or the more exercise, or creatine supplements or muscle building supplements, or many people take those supplements, can increase your creatinine, even though your kidneys are fine. It's just a clinical, and doctors think is your HIV meds. Or if you're on PrEP, which they check your kidney function, not as much with tenofovir, they freak out. And the fact is, it's been proven that that exercise weight training can actually increase your kidney function markers. And they don't know that there's actually a marker called cystatin C, which is, it doesn't have that interference from exercise. So they all freak out. They think you're losing kidney function, when in fact they can prove it with a simple test they can order. And another fact that I've learned after obviously being in the blood testing business for a while is that exercise, muscle building exercise, resistance, weight training machines can also increase your AST and ALT, liver enzymes. Freak out doctors thinking that you're either doing something toxic or whatever, when in fact it can actually, the harder you work out, the more chances you have increased AST and ALT. So that's something that, believe it or not, many doctors don't know, and they actually freak out. So it's something when you working out, if you ever had this experience, just remind your doctor that there may be something else beyond the HIV treatments that may be causing this. A poster that was just presented, 2 weeks ago at CROI, or whenever it was, 3 weeks ago, was very surprising. It's weight training actually improved cognitive function and brain volume in different areas. When we age, negative HIV positive or negative, we tend to lose blood volume. Obviously, there are cognitive issues too, and we've been told many times how many of us are losing cognitive function faster than if we were not HIV positives, which kind of like also freaks me out. And we have some data on aerobic exercise, cardio, improving blood flow to the brain and cognitive. But this is the first exercise that's actually showing that weight training, and these are and these are older guys and ladies too, over 50, 30, it's a small study, 30 people, because it's 6 months of working out 3 times a week with a personal trainer, doing all these exercises, basically gym exercises, weight training exercises with machines and weights 3 times a week for 6 months. It ain't cheap. These studies are expensive because you have to have trainers, and they would actually do cognitive testing just to see how your memory and your capacity is going. They would actually do lab testing, blood testing, and MRIs of your brain. Very fancy. I mean, I'm impressed with this small pilot. And obviously, it's telling me what I wanted to hear anyways. So they completed for 6 months, 30 people went through this 6-month program. Don't you all wish you had a paid personal trainer for 6 months, 3 times a week? So cognitive testing, they also did the soluble CD4 cells, which is a measure of inflammation of the immune system. And they measured strength with 1 repetition RM maximum, meaning the maximum weight you can withstand doing a certain exercise, bicep curl or tricep pull downs. And they found that the strength was correlated. They improved, obviously everybody's strength improved, because that's been proven, not only in HIV positives and negatives. Is being correlated with better functional executive function, in the way cognitively people were thinking, processing information, and brain volume in different areas increased. So this is the first time we have some, because I've been saying, I don't want to see more data on what problems we may have when we age with HIV. We've had enough millions of dollars spent to tell us how bad, worse off we're going to be. Enough of that. Spend money on interventions, things that actually can make a difference, things that are obvious, like exercise. So thank God I'm starting to see, even though they're pilots and poster presentations. So I'm actually encouraged. Other aging posters, they're always usually posters. Posters meaning they're not presenting in front of people. You go into this large room and they have, like we used to do in high school, they have their big posters on a thing, and people walk around and look at the abstracts, and there's usually the private investigator standing by the poster. Not bad, it's great, especially for studies, but very few, I know 5 minutes, very few people get a chance to actually speak to the large audience when you're doing these intervention studies. They're actually finding out that lately we've seen some data that our neurocognitive disorder, HAND, has decreased over the last decade, because obviously we're in better treatments, integrase inhibitors, you name it. That's the first time I hear that. We've been hearing the opposite. So it's like, wow, I jumped at that, obviously. And but there's also some concern that widely prescribed group of medications that are prescribed with while we age can actually increase the not only frailty, but our risk of falls. And usually they're like codeine, even loperamide, which is anti-diarrhea, amitriptyline, which can be used for, excuse me, for sleep and depression. They're basically anticholinergics, so they can actually increase the chances that you fall. So doctors are good, this is good for doctors to know in the case that they're prescribing that, because falling usually is a cause for broken bones and problems with, I'm going to go through this. The next tsunami, I'm very excited about psychedelics. And people say, well, we know all the psychedelics from the 60s, whatever. Now we're having a bunch of companies, you can see on the right-hand side, racing for the first approval of psychedelics with therapy. None of these products are approved without therapy. Okay, that's something I want everybody to understand. So, well, you're gonna do mushrooms on a pill, you're gonna do whatever it is, MDMA, ecstasy on a pill. Oh, we've done that in the past, that doesn't work. There's addiction issues, they're obviously blah, 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 right? But this is actually more lower doses with a counselor, a therapist in the room with you while you're going through an experience. It's called psychedelic integration. Big topic in conferences, psychiatry, and it's coming. I mean, one of his companies is gonna get lucky. Compass is one of them, to approve psilocybin, which is the active ingredient of mushrooms, in a very low dose with therapy to get people to open up and talk about their issues in therapy, especially. On the left-hand side, you see the number of publications related to psychedelics increasing every year. And you've seen it in the news. Some states like Oregon, for instance, they allow personal use of psychedelics if they find you with some in your pocket. So that's also following the path of marijuana. And MAPS is a multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies. Huge, they're funding a big MDMA ecstasy study for PTSD in veterans and non-veterans of the VA, and they're actually on phase 3 now. So it's not like a phase 1, right? And Johns Hopkins, like other medical schools, has a center for psychedelic and consciousness. So all of this that we had in the 60s and was suppressed by the government for many reasons are actually popping up again, and companies are going after, since it's very hard to open up really effectively, even through therapy. So this is a study that MAPS is finishing on a phase 3 clinical trial for MDMA, used for partying, to feel open and loving, and tend to share whoever has done ecstasy. But in this case, it's for people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so far, so good. And we'll see if it gets approved and how physicians are going to manage this therapy, and who in the pharmaceutical industry is going to pick it up, overprice it, and also, but we're having already conferences that train counselors, MSWs, and PhDs, psychologists, on how to do integrative psychedelic therapy. Compass is this company doing psilocybin studies. They just published a 2B study with great results in depression and other. There are side effects. Some people, like anything, have side effects, but there's somebody there in the room to manage them if they're, just for the lack of a better word, having a bad trip. And usually they put you in this room with music. I mean, it is really environment, a tight environment. Ketamine infusions have become very popular. So off-label use of this anesthetic agent given to pediatrics and horses, and used to be a party drug also, still probably is, I don't know. So I'm not too old for that, but it's an IV. Now it's off-label. It's not covered by insurance, but people are paying cash. If you Google ketamine IV Palm Springs, I'm sure there are a few clinics already here with doctors that are basically you go in, you're basically under the IV for an hour and go under. And hopefully some clinics have therapists, but some clinics may not. So it is a cash business. And the FDA actually approved a nasal spray based on a ketamine isomer that is prescribed. And obviously there are different restrictions on who gets it and who doesn't. So this is another, and this is something that completely, I have done all of them, most of them. I've done ketamine IV, I've done psilocybin, and obviously I've had a lot of issues like all of us growing up, aging with HIV, low mood, depression. All of us, if you survive HIV for over 25 years, you've gone through some lows. We've lost a lot of friends. There's a lot of things, the fear of dying, the fear, like multi-drug resistance, you name it. Some of us have trauma. Some of us have PTSD. We don't accept it. I was one of them. We're traumatized by, talk about a war. We're survivors of a war. Now we're going through COVID. We've lost friends. So a lot of us have managed somehow to go through, survive. Try to be the best mood we can. Not show our dark side to anybody because we'll be complaining and we should be happy to be alive. How dare you be depressed? Look at you, 35 years surviving HIV. You have privilege, you have treatments. You shouldn't be depressed, you should be down. And a lot of us, I do, and I talk to my friends, they feel guilty even daring to admit that we're going through rough times. And some of us, like you guys, have probably a luck to have a community in Palm Springs, long-term survivors, you can talk to each other. A lot of people around the country, we don't have that luxury. We don't. Just there are a few of us that are scattered, all the support groups have scattered. The work HF is doing is amazing. You guys you not only made a great decision moving here, retiring from wherever you came, but you're here in a place where it supports you. So I really believe Palm Springs is the best place to be a long-term survivor with HIV, where you still want to have contact with people that get the experience you've gone through. Because some of us cannot say it without being told, why are you complaining? Your lucky self. So there are a lot of these therapies that have at least enabled me to get deeper into that thing that I don't want to deal with, that eventually we all be affected by it. No matter how happy we're, how well we're doing, we're all affected, not only aging, even if we didn't have HIV, it has issues. But this thing about being the trauma that we have built for so many years. And yes, some of us, all of us are grateful to be alive and be present through the whole HIV, changes of HIV, but there are things that an antidepressant may not take care of, and therapy may take years and years to go through and trying to get somewhere. These things, for me, have accelerated that inner seeking pattern of opening up letting my ego go so I can go deeper into what all that means. And obviously I don't want to get too into the whole thing, but I do think there is something to it. So anyways, I'm going to basically end up, I always talk about hormones, but we all know hormones decrease with time, men and women. I'm very excited about this product called, it's a diabetes drug. It's injectable once a week under the skin. It has shown great potential for weight loss in people with diabetes. There's a study for lipodystrophy pilot right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results to see whether or not this actually works to decrease visceral fat deep in the organs. That has been a very popular topic for at least 25 years. And the female side, there are two products that were approved for, they call it hypoactive sexual desire disorder in women. One is an oral, another one is an injectable. Both of them are hardly effective. They were approved because there's nothing else, and they cause nausea. So the uptake hasn't been that great. I have a group in Facebook of women, 8,000 women called Women's Health and HRT, and nobody's taking it, even though it's being FDA approved. Menopause is a tricky thing. There are many changes when it comes to estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. There is not an FDA approved testosterone treatment for women in this country yet. All the products that are accessed by women, postmenopausal women, are made by many of them, at least all of them with testosterone, are made by compounding pharmacies. This is an industry that has been around for 40 years in the United States that makes compounded, customized formulations, mixes of blends of hormones in gels, creams, injections, you name it. Especially for women, women really have very few options that actually can cover the whole gamut of hormones. But the FDA, for the past 2 years, I've become an activist. I created this organization called Hormone Access Coalition. It's been going after trying to shut down the compounding industry, which would put the access issues. And these are a lot more affordable treatments made by all these companies around the United States. There are over 5 million people in the United States using compounded hormones. And the FDA, of course, not going to get into the politics because I have no time, is going after the whole industry. So I'm trying to get people to sign up to a petition on that site, Hormone Access Coalition. Testosterone has come a long way. Now we're injecting under the skin instead of deep into the muscle. We have now, besides injections, creams, gels, pellets, we now have a long-acting injection every 8 weeks to 10 weeks, and a nasal spray, which is 3 times a day. Some guys like it. I don't see why I would do anything 3 times a day, even though I've tried it. And there's actually an oral testosterone that is not liver toxic that you take twice a day called Yatenso. For those that don't want to inject, don't want to put a cream every day under skin. And there's a injectable testosterone subcutaneous once a week that is already provided in a self-injection device for those that are afraid of needles. And there's this device actually injects it for you. Resources, my site, and Jeff's, he's the co-moderator, Post Health. Then we have, I'm plugging my men's health site. We have over 42,000 men from all over the world sharing every day. It gets hectic, but I learn a lot. It's been 12 years of looking, watching chats about different things, erectile dysfunction, etc. Created this group because I didn't really have any female groups, and it's growing like crazy. It's like 8,000 members. I only created it maybe 3 years ago. Women from all over the world sharing issues about health and HRT, hormone replacement therapy. It's the most active group I have. I have one for men too, and it's great because women from all over. I have a book that you can download on excelmail.com. It's 400 pages. It's for free. I did it. Did I finish on time? Thank you so much.